So as you probably know, my talk's going to be about advancing equity and inclusion in products. And I'm Christina Mallon. I'm the Director of Inclusive Design. So what are we going to talk about today? So we have our intro, and I'll go a little bit about me because this is Humans of IT. So I guess if you're attending, you wanted to learn a little bit about me and my story. I'm going to go over what is inclusive design, why is it important, how to build inclusive experiences using inclusive design methodology. And when we talk about experiences, I want to reiterate that we're thinking anything from products to services to ads, kind of anything is really an experience. Resources to learn more. When I'm seeing a great presentation, I always want to learn a little bit more. So it really, really like when someone gives me resources to learn more about the topic. And then we'll go into Q&A. So as I said, I'm Christina. That was actually a picture of me 5 years ago in my first tour of the Microsoft Seattle offices. And I really knew that I wanted to work there. I was coming in as a guest. And I use the pronouns she, her, and they. And as I said, I run inclusive design here at Microsoft. So this is me. I just wanted to let you know, I built this presentation today using my voice and my feet, as both my arms slowly became paralyzed over time. And this is at the beginning of my working career. About 12 years ago, I woke up one day without the ability to use one of my fingers. It was actually my pinky finger on my left hand. And slowly over those 12 years, I lost the use of my arms and hands. They're not exactly sure why. They think it might be a form of ALS, and ALS is also known as Lou Gehrig disease, depending on where you're calling in from. And I realized that I'm not disabled because of the disease that's attacking my nerves. I'm disabled because the world was not designed with me in mind, nor with the other 20% of the population that has a disability. So who I spend my time with, as you know, I run inclusive design here at Microsoft. So I would say 70% of my waking hours are spent working with my amazing team at Microsoft. I see a few of you guys today attending my talk, so thank you. Open Style Lab. Open Style Lab is an inclusive design incubator which started at MIT and is now at Parsons School of Design, where we take engineers, fashion designers, occupational therapists, get them together in one room or one physical and digital room, and we create wearables for and with people with disabilities. Because one thing when we're doing inclusive design, we need to ensure that style is still there because it's a form of expression, and then inclusively. And that's a platform that works with companies to connect people with disabilities and companies that are inclusive of people with disabilities. And one thing that I've seen with all of these organizations is that inclusive design isn't easy, but it's something that needs to be done and it needs to be taught. And that's why I'm here today. Engineering a better world requires an interrogation on how we build. And I was using that pun on purpose. Most engineers are not taught about how to critically think about the work they engage in. It's not really taught in most schools. So in this talk, I'm going to provide guidance on how to build inclusion within your engineering platform. Because inclusive design is really better design. And I just want to make sure everyone understands that I don't mean design in the traditional sense. I mean broadly, and the creation of products, services, and solutions. So anyone who makes a decision that affects somebody else creates an experience, and they're a designer. So mostly everyone on this call is a designer if you're making something that affects somebody else. And why I say inclusive design is better design is because it's better for business. 70% of consumers prefer to buy brands that are inclusive. So it's really better for the bottom line. And brands and companies and employees that are inclusive are 1.7 times more likely to be innovative. So not only does it help with your bottom line from a consumer standpoint, it also helps your companies be more innovative. And 65% of consumers said they will stop buying a brand when it stays silent on an issue that they consider important. So, what are some of the other reasons for inclusive design? Well, you should do it for my daughter. About a month and a half ago, I just had my first child, a baby girl named Margot. And I'm able to feed her, interact with her because of inclusively designed products. I'm able to have my job to provide for her because Microsoft made a decision and said, we're going to make our products and services inclusive so that it works with Dragon Dictation so that I can use my voice to work. So all the decisions that you make really affect others. So make sure that you're thinking of these diverse humans when you're creating things. And that another really great fact about inclusive design is that there was a study done that when someone experiences exclusion, the same activation in the area traditionally associated with the sensory process of physical pain goes off. So it's like every time you exclude in one of your decisions, it's like punching that person in the face. So we need to make sure that we're not being exclusive for reasons of making it better from a money standpoint for our companies, making our clients happy, making people happy, and making my daughter happy. So I'm going to go really, teach you the basics of inclusive design because I know this is a new topic for someone. Inclusive design is a design methodology, and it considers the full range of human diversity. So we're talking about ability, language, culture, gender, age, and other forms of human differences. It empowers designers, and as we said in the beginning, designers or anyone that creates experiences to create products to really serve as many people as possible. Okay. So one thing I want to talk about when we're thinking about humans is we have multiple layers and we belong to multiple communities. Inclusive design, a lot of the times, is often confused with simply designing for people with disabilities. However, true inclusive design is about much more than this. It's about designing for a range of diverse people as possible. And it's a philosophy that considers how size, shape, age, gender, sexuality, ethnicity, income levels, spoken languages, cultures, and customs, and even diets affect how we interact with the world. More importantly, it's about designing products, services, content experience in light of this understanding. Because identities, needs, and preferences affect what users want from technology and how they interact with it. So really by following inclusive design and using this methodology, it's going to allow these designers to create better products for all. Okay. So what are the principles of inclusive design? They're recognize exclusion, which I'll go into a little bit more, learn with diversity, which I'll go into more, and solve for one, extend to all, or create multiple versions. Did you know about 99% of the world interactions are not inclusive? So our lived experience and our values are embedded in what we build and what we don't build. And most of the time, exclusion happens because we're using our own experiences and not considering others. So you really need to ask yourself when you're coming to make an experience, say, who am I leaving out of this design experience? And how does my personal identity impact how I understand my users? So I, Christina Mallon, as a disabled, white, middle-class female, how will that affect the decisions when I'm creating a new technology? Another example of intersectionality. So I talked about intersectionality a little bit when I'm talking about someone being a part of multiple communities. So when people are thinking about solutions that they create for someone who doesn't have arms like me, so they can't type in a password, they use facial recognition a lot of the times as the solution to include people with upper limb impairment like myself. And that allows them to go into their computer or, when you are needing to go through security at an airline, you a lot of the times can use facial recognition or read your iris to identify you so you don't have to pull up your ID since your arms are paralyzed. Well, facial recognition has been really, really, really helpful for people with upper limb disabilities. Well, facial recognition tools have been also used to predict sexual orientation with above an 80% certainty. How can that be dangerous? Well, let's say, and this is actually a true example of a friend. I have a friend who has cerebral palsy. They are studying abroad in China. They identify as being a part of the LGBTQIA plus community and was concerned about being in a country where they're using facial recognition to identify sexual orientation. So while facial recognition is great for someone that, can't use their arms like my friend and like myself, it can be harmful with, segregation or discrimination against one's sexuality in certain regions, because they might collect the data that comes from this and be able to identify that person's sexuality where maybe, being a part of that community is not as welcome in that region. So when we're creating technology and experiences, we need to understand that the end user is not just a part of one community. They're part of multiple communities. And I'll teach you how to go through steps to really think about these different communities when you're designing. So learn from diversity. One of the great things about Microsoft that I've experienced is people really they know what they don't know. And I think that is such a great trait rather than being know-it-alls. So understand how your lived experience might create biases and take kind of track about what you might not know about someone's lived experience. You want to put minority users at the center at the beginning of the project. I think it's extremely important that we have inclusion at the beginning because it is expensive and it also causes a lot of time constraints when you think about inclusivity last or at halfway through a project being done. And you want to ask your partners or your teammates, what are the important custom and practices in life that you might not know about as a designer so you can take into consideration when you're creating a product or service? As best practice, I say each design team should strive to include at least 3 dimensions of disability. We have disability, intersection, and DEI of diversity because it's important to have this on your team. If you can't have individuals with these different types of disability, intersectionality, or DE&I on your team, I really recommend forming an advisory group at the onset of product development and co-create with them throughout. But as you start a new project, look at who's on your team and understand where things might fall and try to ensure that that representation can come from new teammates or from advisory groups. So where to find diverse advisors? Inclusively, my nonprofit Open Style Lab. You can reach out to Fable, Knowability, Black Disabled Creators, Gender Spectrum. You can even go into Facebook groups and you can reach out to individual users that are diverse on Twitter. So here are, some places where to find diverse creators. And you can also reach out to me. I can help to connect you with diverse advisors and creators. And the third principle is solve for one, extend, or create versions. Some of the best innovations of this time were created as a civic solution for a minority group and are now used by all. One of my favorite inventions that was created for a minority group and is now really used by all is the typewriter. And the typewriter really influenced modern day email and things like that. This was created for a woman. She was a countess. She had a visual impairment. So really, we need to understand that we should start with designing for the farthest edge case. Let's say that was somebody who, was deaf or blind, and then allowing it to see if it works for other groups. And other innovations that were created from this design process were email, touch screens, curb cuts, voice activation. So all of these were innovations that came from designing for the edge cases. And also, another way is that you can create multiple versions or customized versions. So because of technology and 3D printing, we're able to create multiple versions of something for cheap. So an example of this is the adaptive surface kit. And here on the screen, we have the pictures of the adaptive surface kit. We have one of the pool tabs. So for me, I've broken about 10 computers trying to use my mouth and bite on the computer and bring it over to another area of my house because I've broken the screen. So my IT team hates me. And why I have really benefited from the Surface Adaptive Kit is that they have, and I'm showing this on screen on the upper left-hand corner, a pull tab and a ribbon that you can grab. And really, I use my teeth, or if you, let's say, want to use your foot, you can loop it through the tab. Also, for my friends with visual impairments, you can use the stickers. They put these tactile stickers that you can put really anywhere, but right here I show it on the keyboard that allows you to identify keys using raised stickers if you have a visual impairment. So these are additions that you can add to your laptop. So it allows you to access it in a more easily way. So this is an example of really creating multiple versions. Okay, so we have about 10 minutes left, so I'm going to rush through to make sure we have room for questions. So this is the inclusive design process, and because I wanted to move on to like more of the how, because I know that's what you were really here to learn about. This inclusive design methodology can be used in the creation of any experience, product, service. So really what we have is the first step is notice. Notice what you might be excluding, or notice what are the lived experiences of the people on your team that they might not be representing, a diverse group. Emphasize. It's super, super important that you understand and have empathy and do empathy exercises for these other communities and with these other communities, and that they are co-creating with you. So you really understand their lived experiences. And then define what's your goal here? What do you want to solve for? And then ideate how can you solve for it? And then prototype. It's important to prototype before you ship something out, because prototyping allows you to create a really, low fidelity experience. You test it out to ensure that it's inclusive before going live. And then you do a study to understand after it's gone live about how it's impacted the community. So this is really kind of the inclusive design process. But since I'm talking to many engineers, I've taken this generic inclusive design process shown on the last slide and applied it to a process map for building a new digital experience. So I put this map together with members of my team at Microsoft. And this really helped us define how we wanted to get to innovation, because that's the key here. The tech companies and big businesses need to be innovative. So we need to figure out a way to be innovative and also be inclusive. So to get to new innovative ideas, you could use a design sprint with people with disabilities or other diverse members of the community. Also, ensure that you're getting user feedback on your other products, because that might help inspire new innovative products. Host a hack. At Microsoft, we host many hackathons that lead to great ideas. Or just visit your backlog. There's always, a list of things to do and ideas to really take upon. So it's important to really do these things to get to ideas for innovative and inclusive features and products. And this really is kind of right here is the section that covers really notice, empathize, define, ideate. So this is really that section, as we like to link it to the previous map of inclusive design. And then from design, from that idea, you want to co-design with PWD, but you also want to do a spec review. And it moves into dev. And you want to test. You want to do automated testing. We have automated testing, built into a lot of the different softwares that Microsoft creates. And you also want to do manual PWD testing or testing with those communities, because automated can't pick up everything. So really get out there and try using a screen reader yourself. There's amazing, YouTube tutorials on how to use a screen reader. It's really not that hard, I promise. And then when you release your innovative and inclusive product and feature, do a usability study to really make sure that you understood the challenges that these communities were facing and that your innovation actually solves their problem. And this section really, from design to usability study, is prototype, test, reflect when we compare it to the inclusive design process. So this is a chart that we have the makeup of my team at OpenStyle Lab. And what I think is really cool that we do is we take cross-functional teams to create innovations. So whenever you are putting a team together, and if you have the ability to put a team together, not only do you want to make sure that you have a diverse makeup of the team from a cultural, race, disability, sexuality standpoint, you want to make sure they also have different skills. So when you are doing inclusive design, it's best to have, let's say if you're doing it for technology or building a website, you also want to make sure you have, a designer on it at the beginning. You want to make sure that the process that you're, getting done on that website, is that going to be too many clicks and hurt somebody's wrist? You want to make sure that these cross-functional teams are together to create this innovation, because I believe cross-functional teams make more innovation and allow for more inclusion. Okay, so we have 5 minutes left. I'm going to tell you about a few ways to learn more about inclusive design. You can read Mismatch by Kat Holmes. She's my mentor. She was also one of the leads of inclusive design at Microsoft. You can follow me on Instagram. I'm Christina Disarmed, or on Twitter, Mallon Christina. I try to put a lot of inclusive design tips and tricks and articles on my feed. You can read, OpenStyle Labs journals, which talk about style and inclusion. You can check out the Microsoft Inclusive Design Toolkit at microsoft.com/design/inclusive. And my last words is, inclusive design is a challenge even for those with the best intentions. Forward progress will require dedicated effort, and inclusion is everyone's responsibility. So thank you so much for your time, and I'm going to open up kind of our discussion for questions.
Hey, Christina, there was a question that was asked earlier, wondering if it's possible to share the slide deck or if that was something that you had planned on doing.
Yeah, I can definitely. I'll share the slide deck in the Teams chat. Everything in here is, really just kind of process that has been inspired by others, and I think can really be applied to anyone's job. So I will definitely provide it if you think it'll be helpful. Okay, let me go through, see if there's any. Okay, loving all of this chat. Writing down, what are those for again? That's 2 and 3. Okay, so Donna's got that. How about making technology accessible to users with autism like myself? Paul, that is a really, really great idea. Autism is definitely something that we really think about when we are building. We have, members of, the overall Microsoft team with autism. We also, have created a lot of opportunities for users with autism to provide feedback on our products to ensure that it reflects the lived experience of someone with autism. But Paul, feel free to reach out because, I would love to co-create with you as I don't have that lived experience myself. So having, influence from someone like you would make my work better. And Angela, definitely put us in touch. I think it's so important to have the OT perspective. Um, I think a lot of people don't realize how harmful technology can be on your body. So it's important that we're creating technology and experiences that reduce any harm kind of on your wrists or on your eyes. Dave, we have my 87-year-old requires very tight restriction of program feature set to avoid confusion. This is exact opposite of what younger users demand. How do you reconcile this? You create multiple versions. I think that is really the way to do that. That's why I kind of the 3 principles of inclusive design, I added that make multiple versions as kind of my own adaptation because I think that's important, especially as long as those multiple versions are just as beautiful as the original version. And there is an email to reach out to me, Paul. It's Mallon at Microsoft.com. And then Brian added a nice question. Companies have recently been tasked for products that are very much not inclusive. How does one go about pushing back and not remaining silent when you see exclusivity in product design? So most of the time, I will try to find someone on LinkedIn. So let's say this already launched and I don't have a connection to someone on that product team. And instead of, calling them out on Twitter or LinkedIn, I send them a private message and tell them, hey, you know, let's try to work on this because I think that you guys could do better. And I provide them with resources and feedback. I think if you can't find somebody that you can also message the brand's Twitter account or LinkedIn account and tell them kind of what's going on if you can't find that individual person. And if no one responds to you, you can put on Instagram or Twitter on your own page that you found it not inclusive, and then hopefully that gets their attention. But I recommend going specifically directly to the actual brand via direct message rather than kind of blasting them online. I don't think that usually helps. And offer your help. And that's how I've been able to make change when things haven't been accessible to me because, not having 2 arms, many things are not accessible to me and have been able to really get things changed to different organizations that I wasn't a part of because I went to them directly. And it's worked. To tell you the truth, most people don't realize that they're being exclusive and they want to help. And I think you can help them because your lived experience is so important and should be reflected in products. Okay, let me see if there's any more questions. And Sunny, feel free to reach out to me directly and I can talk about getting your engineering on board with inclusive design. Awesome. Well, I don't see any more questions. Let me know if I missed anyone. Feel free to raise your hand, or if typing is hard for you, feel free to just chat now. But I know we're coming up. And Paul, I saw your hand raised. Microsoft products are accessible to people with autism. So there are many, products that are accessible to people with autism and, thoughtful design with that in mind. So let's definitely chat hotline because I just saw that it's 3 o'clock. um, let's chat more because we need to make this world more inclusive. So the more lived experience and opinions that I can hear, I can try to do my best to make sure the products that I create with my larger teams at Microsoft are inclusive and reflective of society at large. So thank you, everyone. And I will add this document that I just presented to you in the chat so that you have it. Thanks so much, everybody. I appreciate your time.